Hi, I'm Dr. Jackson Crawford. I'm a specialist in the Old Norse language, currently teaching at the University of California, Berkeley, and as of fall 2017 at the University of Colorado, Boulder. I'm back today with another video about a topic in Norse language and myth, and today I just wanted to give you a brief introduction to a saga that I think is very interesting, but also very underserved in discussions about Old Norse literature and mythology. And that is a saga called Hervor Saga og Heidrek, the saga of Hervor and her son Heidrek. This saga is very notable not only for including a lot of sort of mythological material on the human level. It does include gods as well, at least the god Odin participates, as well as a magical sword. It also has Hervor, who is a warrior woman in the most dramatic fashion anywhere in Norse literature, as well as a riddle contest that Odin has with Heidrek, her son. To give you a brief summation of the saga, we begin with a magical sword named Tyrfinger, which is made by two dwarves named Durin and Dvalin, whose names, of course, are also borrowed in J.R.R. Tolkien's legendary world. The sword Tyrfinger is cursed, or it has a feature, depending on how you look at it. It cannot be put back into its scabbard after it's been drawn until it has killed someone. And no matter where it cuts someone, the wound will be lethal. So this sword belongs at the opening of the saga to the hero Angantyr, who is a berserker, and he, together with his 11 berserker brothers, berserkers often come in groups of 12, fight a battle on the island of Somsoy, which is a place very much associated with magic. It also appears, for instance, in Lokasena. And the end of the battle is that all of the brothers are killed. They are buried in mounds, and Angantyr's daughter, Hervor, is raised by her maternal grandfather, a jarl named Bjarmar. When Hervor finds out that her father is Angantyr and that he's buried on Somsoy, she resolves to go break into his burial mound and retrieve the magic sword Tyrfinger. She asks her mother to make her man's clothing and armor, and she adopts the new name Hervarder, which you can look at as a masculine version of her feminine given name Hervor. So disguised as the man Hervarder, Hervor leads a group of men to the island Somsoy, but only she is brave enough to get off the ship and go on shore. On shore, she encounters a shepherd who tells her to turn back because she's come into the country of these fearsome creatures that still live inside their mounds, sort of the Norse equivalent of a zombie. But she ignores the warnings and she goes straight to where her father is buried. There's a fire burning above the mound. This also may remind you of something in the Tolkien corpus. And she goes straight through the fire, breaks into the mound, and she encounters her undead father. She demands the sword, but he doesn't want to give it to her, and they have an exchange in an Eddic-style poem that is often called The Waking of Angantyr, and this poem appears to be much earlier than the saga that it's preserved in. At the end of their exchange, he does give her the sword, although with a warning about the curse that's on it. And she then continues her adventures, although she has to find a new crew and ship because her crew left in fear while she was in the burial mound. But eventually she comes back home and she marries a fellow named Hovindr, and they have two sons, Angantyr and Heidrek. As is fairly typical in these sagas, there is a brother who is of nice disposition that everybody likes, and a brother who's of surly disposition that nobody likes. And in this case, the surly one is Heidrek, and he is sent away to be fostered with a man named Gitsur, which it should be noted is a common Odin name. Heidrek comes back home at one point during a party for his brother Angantyr, but at the party he behaves terribly. He gets people fighting and killing one another, and finally he's asked to leave, but before he leaves, he turns around and he throws a stone back into the tents where the party is taking place, and the stone hits his brother Angantyr and kills him. So Heidrek is banished by his father, but his mother Hervor doesn't want him to be sent away with nothing, so she asks Hovindr to give him some advice, which he does. A lot of the advice seems a little random and inapplicable, but eventually Heidrek goes out of his way to break every single piece of advice. This is a sort of funny subplot throughout the story that I can't touch on in a very short summation like this, but it is one of the more colorful aspects of the saga. He breaks every single piece of advice his father gives him, down to the seemingly inconsequential things. His mother, Hervor, also gives him the sword Tyrfingr, and Heidrek embarks on his own adventures with the magic sword. Eventually, he becomes king of his own kingdom with 2 children, Angantyr and Hervor. There's a third Angantyr. It was very common to name children after the grandparent of the matching sex. So he's got Angantyr and Hervor passed down the generations of his family. These are his children with Helga, who killed herself after Angantyr killed her father. It's kind of a long story too. And then he also has a child with a Hunnish princess that he kept as a concubine for a while named Sivka, and that child is his son, Hlodr. Well, Heidrek becomes a wise and well-loved king, and part of the fame of his realm is that he's an excellent court. The judges at the court are the men who tend to his golden pig, and if you don't like the judgments of the boar court, you can always appeal by posing riddles to Heidrek that he can't solve. So there is a man named Gestumblindi in his kingdom who has an upcoming court date, and he's afraid he's going to lose, so he sacrifices to Odin to try to get Odin's help with his court case. And sure enough, Odin shows up and takes Gestumblindi's form, and then goes to Heidrek and starts posing riddles to him in an effort to win Gestumblindi's court case. These are the only riddles known from Old Norse, even though the gist of the story is sort of similar to the poem in the Poetic Edda, Vafthrûdnismal, where Odin goes and he competes in a wisdom contest with Vafthrûdnir. These are true riddles. Students today tend to think these riddles are kind of bad. I'll give you a couple examples. I saw something harder than a ram's horn, blacker than a raven, but whiter than a shield, and straighter than a spear. Harder than a ram's horn, blacker than a raven, whiter than a shield, straighter than a spear. The answer is obsidian with the sun shining on it. That's the black, the obsidian, but it's white because it's reflecting the sun. What is a creature with 10 tongues, 20 eyes, and 40 feet? 10 tongues, 20 eyes, 40 feet. It's a sow pregnant with 9 piglets. Or, here's a favorite. What is an inhabitant in the soil, a corpse sitting on a corpse, a blind one riding on a blind one to the sea, carried on a horse without breath? An inhabitant of the soil, a corpse sitting on a corpse, a blind one riding a blind one to the sea, carried on a horse without breath. Well, the answer is a dead horse on an ice floe with a dead snake on the horse, and they're floating together down the river. Finally, however, Heidrek guesses all of these riddles, and Odin is forced to use his real ace up his sleeve and asks, "What melti Odin I ora Baldri, Odr han veri o bol Hofdr?" What did Odin say in Baldr's ear before he put him on the funeral pyre? This is also the question that Odin uses to win his contest with Vafthrûdnir in the Poetic Edda. Well, Heidrek now knows that it's Odin and that he can't win because no one knows the answer to this question. So he stands up, draws Tyrfingr, and he tries to cut at Odin, but Odin turns into a hawk, and so it just cuts off the tail feathers of the hawk. And Odin curses him to be killed by slaves, and indeed, Heidrek is soon killed by slaves. At that point, his kingdom is taken over by his son Angantyr, who inherits the sword Tyrfingr, and Angantyr is approached soon after this by his half-brother Hlodr, who wants a share of Angantyr's inheritance, of the inheritance from Heidrek. Angantyr doesn't want to share it, but Hlodr eventually convinces him to share a little bit, till Heidrek's foster father, who's living with him, this fellow named Gitsur, remember this is a common Odin name, and Odin always wants to cause battle. Odin insults Hlodr, calling him a son of a slave, so Hlodr doesn't want to negotiate anymore, he just wants to fight, and so Hlodr leads an ill-fated battle against his brother Angantyr, in which his sister Hervor also fights. So we have 2 generations of warrior women named Hervor. At the end, Hlother is killed, and Agantyr stands over his body and speaks a famous stanza from the poem that narrates most of this action at the end of the saga. This poem is also probably a great deal older than the saga. Bolvat okkur bróðir, banni emekþin orðin, that mun uppi, illar dómur Norna. We are cursed, brother. I have become your killer. It will be notorious forever, and the judgment of the Norns is evil. And with that, the saga concludes, except for a couple concluding chapters connecting this family with later families, including the family of Ragnar Lothbrok and his sons. I enjoy teaching this saga. I think there's a lot in it for myth, for literature, and for cultural stuff. And I am aware of only one recent-ish translation, which is by Christopher Tolkien, son of J.R.R. Tolkien. This is fairly easy to find, and I should also mention that it's on the website of the Viking Society for Northern Research. This translation does use very archaic English, especially in the poems, and so I've occasionally thought about translating Hervor Saga og Heidrek myself. Perhaps after my second book, my translation of the Saga of the Volsungs and the Saga of Ragnar Lothbrok comes out in September, which will follow my translation of the Poetic Edda, where you can find Vafthrudnismal, the poem in which Odin has the wisdom contest with the giant that he also wins with the question about what Odin said in Baldur's ear before he put him on the funeral pyre. Well, from the University of California, Berkeley, I'm wishing you all the best.